Hi, welcome to Laura's View and Tarot 2. I am so glad you're here. Today's date is Monday, November 3rd, 2025. In this video, we're going to take a look at tiny homes and with an eye to the possibility that there's a psyop involved with the entire movement, and we'll see what the tarot has to say. Before we do, I'd like to share my experience with tiny homes a little bit. When I lived in Alaska, I owned a condominium that was almost 1,300 square feet. And I knew that was more than I needed as a single person. And I was willing to downsize. And I started doing some research about tiny homes. And while it's intriguing, and I see why people get caught up in downsizing to the point that they can live in a space as small as 400 square feet or less, I wondered if it would work long term for me because as I did my research, I found out that almost half the people that opt for tiny home living don't continue in it long term. And those that remain, the 50% that remain, some of those are simply accepting the fact that they have bought into something that depreciates rather than appreciates, and their options to move out and move on are extremely limited. So that seems to me like a poor satisfaction, long-term satisfaction variable to consider. So when I came to Maine after I retired, I took a 1 year lease on an apartment that was just under 400 square feet with an eye to, is this how I could live size-wise permanently? Now, I didn't think I wanted to stay there long term because there were issues with being a renter. You don't have the autonomy to make changes. You don't, you have to wait for the improvements. If there's bleed over noise from thin walls, and there was a lot of that, you have to ignore it or live with it. And I was living with things like, not having an ensuite laundry system. And I was used to having my own home and being able to do laundry when I wanted. So I finally decided that for me, there had to be a middle ground, and I chose a smaller home. I bought something that was built in the 1950s, mostly because here in northern Maine, there weren't a lot of new home options, and those that are being built seem to be custom homes of the large variety, but there's no smaller subdivisions going in or new builds like that. So I chose an older home. And the first thing we did was we took out the sheetrock and put in insulation in the walls and added it in the ceiling and put a better front door and side door on and storm screens. In other words, we looked at energy efficiency first and then started in on some renovations. And I couldn't do as many as I wanted. The pocketbook was not had a bottom to it, and I think I got taken advantage of in a couple of cases by contractors that worked slow and charged big. But eventually I got in here. So where am I at now? I'm in a little home that's been renovated pretty much the way I want it, and it's about just over 700 square feet. I have my laundry area is part of my living, it's within the home, it's out in the mudroom. And I have a bedroom that I was able to dedicate to a studio and not have to take up and put down every time I wanted to create content. If I want to do a jigsaw puzzle and it's larger, I've got room for it. If I want to bring in something, I can bring it in. When I was trying to live in less than 400 square feet, if one pair of shoes came in, another pair had to go out. There was just no extra room at all. And if my grandson wants to have a toy box here and keep some toys in it, I can do it. It's not a problem. So for me, a middle ground worked better. But let's talk about the tiny home movement. There are dozens of YouTube channels that are dedicated to tiny home living. There have been several successful TV shows about tiny homes and what's involved with the tiny home living. And there's chatter in the alt media community that what this is really about is a psyop designed to have people accept not just reducing their footprint, their carbon footprint, but minimalizing their lives to the where there's less in our lives for our lives, leaving more time, space, the views and vistas for those with the big, deep pockets and a desire to have no limits to what's available for them. So let's see if the tarot has some confirmation about that or just additional insights and information. Is the tiny home movement actually a psyop designed to brainwash us into accepting living much smaller than we were ever intended to, plus additional insights and information? So there is some alt media chatter that varies in tone from they're shrinking our homes to shrink our humanity, our souls, that there's a psyop element involved with the tiny home movement, that it's being pushed on us and capitalized on for reasons other than energy efficiency and living small. Now, understand, some people choose that, it's right for them, no problem. I'm just asking, is there truth in the speculation that the tiny home movement is an agenda serving other purposes than the good of humanity, plus additional insights and information? We have the Knight of Cups, the Fool, King of Wands, Five of Swords, the Devil, Six of Swords, and Page of Cups. I'll pull a couple more cards and we'll see what they have to say, but let's look at these and see what they have in the context of the tiny home movement for us to think about and mull over and understand. So, first of all, yeah, the Knight of Cups is often a card that talks about having an agenda, has some trickery involved. So there is a right there with this card. We've got a confirmation that there is a psyop element to the tiny home movement, that they're wanting people to jump on board, see it as the positives and not weigh the negatives to the situation. And the reason they do is because they want to move forward into a plan where the typical ordinary human, like I said, not only is mindful of their carbon footprint, but just leads the smallest life possible. In other words, having us be more accepting and more drone-like in our behavior and our lives. And as we willingly give up the flexibility of having a little space that's negotiable, maybe we'll have the willingness to give up other items in our lives or lifestyles that shouldn't be negotiable, but somehow have become so. The King of Wands for the recent past, yeah, there were some elites that got together and they saw this tiny home movement. In other words, if they can't get us into little smart cities and 200 square foot cubicle apartments, they wanted as many people as possible opting for tiny home living. And not necessarily because it's right for them, but because they've been programmed to think it's right for them. And again, I'm seeing a lot of buyer regret and remorse on those that go that way. And the ones that are happy with it are very happy, but there's if half leave and the other half, some of those are simply staying because I couldn't sell their property or they were out of options because their money was tied up in that property and the rental of land, etc. Just it's a little worrisome. Current situation again, just they're just saying again, here is a card just saying, yeah, not everybody's happy with the situation. However, the programmers are happy. Enough people are accepting it as a lifestyle that has allure and maybe a little bit of uh, position signaling. See, my carbon footprint's so low because my house is so small, type of thing. They're fairly happy with it, but the people in it aren't. And yeah, here we got the devil showing up for the near future, just saying, yeah, there is an agenda involved with this, guys. Okay, if not, that is not to criticize any of my viewers that have opted and are happy in a tiny home situation, or they had no other choice but to go that route. Sometimes we don't have a lot of options. I couldn't have built something new from scratch with the money I had available. I had to find something that was mid-size for one person, and fix it up and be happy with it. So we do what we have the money to do. I understand that. The looking forward though, people are going to see past that. Those that again, humanity is waking up on all sorts of topics and things that we were letting ourselves get programmed for or to accept without question. And so we're getting to a place where people that opt for a tiny home lifestyle really are opting for it with their eyes open to the positives, the negatives, and the dubious elements of that lifestyle so that they go into it with their eyes open a little more. Okay. The Page of Cups then is the nice surprise is that waking up process so that in the future, more people opting for a tiny home lifestyle aren't doing it because they were programmed to accept it, but because they did their homework and it's just an option that they decided was right for them, which is the way it should have always been. We have the Moon card for one of our final two cards, and then the Nine of Cups. The Moon card just talks about a passing away, and a passing away of that programming being successful, being something that was worthwhile. So, yeah, for whatever reason, tiny homes have been a psyop that was designed to intrigue and entrap people that it wasn't right for. And in the future, that's going away. And those that opt for that are going to be much more happier with their choice because they didn't get programmed into it. They had their eyes open and did their research and said, that's enough for me, and it is, and that's how it's going to be. So let's recap. There is some chatter in the alt media community that the tiny home movement is actually a psyop, that it's a calculated and purposeful program that was designed to get people to be intrigued and then ensnared into a lifestyle that might not have been right for them. Tiny home living, homes that are 400 square feet or less. As I looked at some of the data on that, I saw that the number of people that don't stay in tiny home situations long term is about half of those that go into it. So that tells me there's a lot of buyer's remorse and buyer's regret. And just for a long-term lifestyle, for many people, it's not right. For some people, it's the perfect solution. But my question for the tarot was, were we programmed to accept it as being viable for a wider range of people than it really was? And so we looked at that. I shared a little bit about my personal downsizing story, where I went from almost 1,300 square foot in Alaska to a less than 400 square foot temporary situation while I was leasing, while I found something to buy and rent, and now to my current home, which is just over 700 square feet, which is enough. It's not spacious, but it's enough that I've got some flexibility of space that I was looking for, an ability to have a dedicated channel area in a room. And so for me, 700 was wonderful. I could have maybe done even 600, but less than four without having like a washer and dryer on site and a little bit of flexibility room and a place for my grandson to keep a few toys. It just wasn't going to work for me long term. So I decided not to think about building a tiny home. But again, I bought a smaller home and renovated it and made it much more energy efficient before I moved in. So that was my story on it, kind of finding a middle ground that worked for me and was right for me. The tarot cards, though, when we asked about the psyop element, they absolutely said, yeah, definitely. People were and are, but it's going to fade away as ineffectiveness, have been programmed to be intrigued by and then dive into tiny home living. And then they find out later on some of that entails it's not just the flexibility of space, it's zoning regulations that keep them from having a fixed address, that make them have to. And then there's insurance issues. There's the fact that these homes, even though you're building it and considering it a home, tend to depreciate rather than appreciate in value. And a lot of times people get caught up in things where they're having to rent land or pay HOA fees or park fees and things like that, that just added costs that end up with them having a little less sovereignty and flexibility that they might have had they not opted for that lifestyle. So some people were definitely getting intrigued to the point that they tried it, found out it wasn't right for them, and if they hadn't been programmed to be intrigued and excited and to take that step, they might have more thoughtfully made a decision that long term they were happy with, whether it was small home, downsizing somewhat, tiny home, whatever it might be. So, yeah, there was definitely an agenda at play that is failing. The cards said we're going to continue to wake up and make choices that are based on rational thought and decision, not programming. So the cards overwhelmingly said that humanity is waking up to many things we've been programmed on, and we're casting them aside and making decisions that are based a little more thoughtfully and a little more based on our own true homework values and ideas. So yeah, tiny homes. Don't just do your homework. Think about the possibility that you may be being programmed to be intrigued by it and don't fall for it. That's it for this video. I thank you so much for your time and attention. Appreciate each and every one of you. For those of you that do have a tiny home lifestyle and you're happy with it, that is great. And like I said, I was able to downsize, but I didn't go as small as I originally thought because I wanted more flexibility, and that was what was right for me. And you do what's right for you, and it's all good. Until next time, if you're willing to receive it, I send you love, light, and I wish for you everything bright. Bye.